Hello. Hi, how's everybody doing? Are we live? I think I'm streaming in 2 platforms again, on Instagram and on Facebook. So I don't know if you guys can see me on both. Go ahead and comment and let me know that you can see me on either of the platforms. But let's get started. I wanted to do yet another installment of the live, what I call Q&A sessions. Sometimes they end up being educational sessions. Last week, I had put a question about, should I do liver detox live or should I do something with cortisol and weight gain? And I got exactly roughly the same number of votes, about 20 in each of them. And I was just like, wow, blown away. So clearly both topics are very, very important to everybody. So I'm going to do cortisol and weight gain today, and then I will do the liver detox next week. And the reason I kind of picked it this way too is because if I start with cortisol and weight gain, really talk about everything that happens with cortisol and all the excess cortisol and things like that, it all ends up getting stored, ultimately, all that excess cortisol in the liver. And so maybe we should do the cortisol and weight gain part first and then do the liver part, liver detox next. So that's what I was going to do. And let's see, I see people saying hello. Someone said, thank you for doing this. Oh, I absolutely love it. Love it, love it, love it. I just love teaching, love giving back. And as you guys mostly know, my journey was a very long, arduous one. And I've been practicing functional medicine for 10 years. And there was a year and a half, almost 2 years, that I was completely bedridden. And for 4 years, just really took me using all of my own principles and everything to get my health back. And so I just promised at that point that I would give back, help people in the same situation. I was very lucky because I have more of a medical and health and wellness background. I'd been practicing functional medicine at that point for over 10 years. And still, had to succumb to something that was kind of unknown. I had some of the best world-renowned naturopathic doctors, functional medicine doctors as my colleagues, and really guiding me in my journey and overseeing kind of what I was going through. So I really wanted to give back at some point. So you are most welcome. I absolutely love doing this. I will have to always start with a disclaimer. This is an educational forum. Any discussions provided here are simply for educational purposes, and they are not considered treatment. They're not intended to diagnose, treat, or cure any disease or medical condition. As always, please consult with your physician or any other qualified healthcare provider before embarking on a new treatment, a new product, new diet, new fitness program, any of that stuff. So with that, let's get started. I wanted to, we're talking about cortisol and weight gain, and so many people, especially women, don't realize how these two are so interconnected. And as we get older, 35, 40 plus, women really try to work harder and harder to try and lose weight. But really what they're doing is going in the opposite direction, increasing the cortisol, so really increasing their weight gain. So I really wanted to focus on the cortisol weight gain connection and what you can do about it. Now, as you guys know, today's day and age, we have so much increased stress in our lives. Than what our mother's generation had at this age. I mean, we have just a ton more stress with our lives, with our careers. We're all trying to just, get these amazing careers. There's so much work pressure. There's decreased social interactions, especially since COVID. But even pre-COVID, if you think about it, I grew up being outside till 9 o'clock every night, every night. And my kids are actually doing homework. They're in their, little bubbles. They very rarely see other kids. And that's all the kids, you see barely any kids playing out on the streets now, so there's just decreased social interaction. Now, COVID, unfortunately, made this 10 times worse. And we're also making very, very poor food choices, a lot of preservatives, additives, just a lot more junk food now with our crazy busy lives, stressful lives, things like that, food on the go, fast food is so easily available, Uber Eats, DoorDash, they bring food to you in 30 minutes, so we don't even have to work for it. You just get it at your doorstep. And so poor food choices, processed foods, and then just sedentary lifestyle. We are working out less and less, walking less and less than our parents' generation. I remember my parents, my mom, would walk to the little kiosks and would walk to the, to go buy milk and bread and all of that stuff. Now it's just Instacart, or you just drive to the grocery store, go get it and come back. So all of these things have added so much stress in our lives, careers, alcohol, drinks, family stress and kid stress and decreased social interaction, sedentary lifestyle, poor food choices. I mean, we're just pumping more and more cortisol into our lives, more and more stress. So, what is cortisol? Cortisol is produced, it's a hormone produced in the adrenal cortex. It is a glucocorticoid, which means it's a steroid. So it needs glucose to work. So that right there should be your first clue that cortisol is a steroid hormone and it needs glucose to work. So when you have more cortisol, you are going to need more sugar, more glucose. You'll have more cravings just to make cortisol function because it's there. Like cortisol has arrived, which means we need more sugar, more of it to be able to function. So what is the purpose, right? Once we have this cortisol in our system, so the first thing that it'll do is block insulin, right? Cortisol is really smart. It says, you know what? I need sugar to work. I need sugar to function. So I'm going to block insulin because, as we know, insulin's purpose is to break down sugar. So cortisol is like, nope, I'm the new guy in town. We're going to block insulin so that I can have more blood sugar in this bloodstream, right? It breaks down glucose to have more in the bloodstream. So cortisol will break down glucose so that it has glucose available for it. Okay. Cortisol also reduces protein uptake to keep glucose in the system. Because if you are bringing more protein into the bloodstream, then there's no room for glucose. And cortisol like, I need more glucose. So how about we keep this protein absorption at bay so that we can keep glucose high in the system because I need more glucose. But it also suppresses the immune system. When you have high cortisol, or if you're in a constant state of fight or flight, as it's called, there is no time to get sick. The body's like, not falling sick right now because we don't have time. We are running from that saber-toothed tiger. We have no time to get pregnant. So all those sex hormones, they're going to get suppressed because there's no time to get pregnant. There's no time to digest food. Like, we are not in rest and digest right now. We are in fight or flight. So we are not digesting all that food you're eating. We are not resting right now. And that all is done by cortisol, right? So now when I say all that, it seems like, gosh, cortisol is such a bad guy, right? It's really not the case. It's not such a bad guy. See, we all need cortisol. Without cortisol, we would die. So cortisol is not that much of a bad guy because it has a lot of anti-inflammatory properties, especially if you have seasonal allergies, things like that. Like, it's got really good anti-inflammatory, antihistamine properties. It gives us energy to deal with that saber-toothed tiger. So that's, it wakes you up. It says, whoa, run. It gives you that energy. It increases your focus too. So it makes you a little bit more alert because you can't just be sleeping and resting when that saber-toothed tiger is attacking you. You're really trying to figure out your way. So it increases your focus, increases your blood pressure. It increases even your heart rate. So I call these things hormesis, which is the good kind of stress, right? So when you exercise, that's a kind of hormesis, a little bit of cortisol that's produced, that's good cortisol. When you do a cold plunge, that's a good kind of hormesis. When you do fasting, when you do intermittent and extended day fasting, that's a good kind of cortisol. So that's called hormesis. And that's a good kind of stress. You want that. You want that on a day-to-day basis because that actually helps your body function better. But you only want that in a short term, in a short time. Because if it gets out of control and this becomes the norm, and that saber-toothed tiger becomes the norm, then you are constantly in a state of high cortisol. So when you're in a state of high cortisol, if you listen to just everything what I just kind of explained, what do you think is going to happen? And go ahead and comment in the comments too. But what do you think is going to happen at that point when you are in this constant state of high cortisol? Remember, as I mentioned, cortisol needs glucose. So what are you going to keep doing when you're in a high state of cortisol? You are going to keep eating, and especially junk food and that snack time when you're super hungry. That's when you're really going to start, needing more sugar. And so with high stress comes increased cravings for sugar, increased comfort food. You just try to get comfort and get quick sugar fixes right away for energy. Your sleep becomes very disrupted. Like if you go back and if you see the part where I said that cortisol increases your focus. So it's fine in the short term because, those 15 or 20 minutes that you have a presentation or you're running from the saber-toothed tiger, that's perfectly fine. Beyond that, when you stay in extended periods of high cortisol, you are high, alert, and focused all the time. So guess what? You're not sleeping, right? You're not sleeping at all. So your sleep is very disrupted. It makes you hold on to fat, right? Because it's saying, fight or flight, like we are in a state of distress right now. Maybe we're in a famine. Maybe we're not going to get food for a long time. You need to hold on to this fat because we need this fat. And so it holds on to fat. And then it decreases sex hormones. Like I said earlier on, when cortisol is high, everything is focused and channeled to running from the saber-toothed tiger and to help with that stressful situation. Now, if you're in continuous stressful situation, high stress lives, families, husbands, kids, jobs, demanding bosses, blah, 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 whatever. Chronic illness is a big high stress situation. Any of those things, then the body's saying, we have no time for getting pregnant right now. We have no time for sex hormones, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, all of those DHEA. We have no time for that right now. So what happens is that everything then goes down with those levels too. But it also decreases, like I said, your rest and digest. And so you're just in this fight or flight, but that resting, bringing that blood pressure down, digesting the food you ate, none of that is happening because you are in a high state of cortisol at that time, all the time at this point. So what happens with all of those things? You're eating more, you have more cravings, digestion is not happening, your body's holding on to fat, your sex hormones are not being produced. So what happens with all of this? You gain weight. So you can see how this is such a vicious cycle and how the high cortisol states, short term is fine. Quick, burst of cortisol here and there, that's fine. But beyond that, when you are in this chronic state of high cortisol, you start to gain weight. So in the long term, what does that lead to, right? Like if you have constant cortisol blocking insulin, what happens? That leads to insulin dysregulation and insulin resistance because your body is like, we keep producing so much insulin because you need so much more than we were originally producing. And so you start going into insulin resistance, which causes weight gain. You start to weight gain around the middle, like the belly and the hips and things like that. And then you have immune suppression because your body is saying, we have no time right now to, fight diseases and all this stuff. We're in this fight or flight mode. So you start going into immune suppression. Over time, when the body has been producing so much cortisol and the adrenals have been producing so much cortisol, you go into a state of chronic fatigue because your body then says, we've done this for so long. We are completely exhausted and fatigued with this high level constantly of this cortisol for 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years, it doesn't matter. We are in this state and we can't do it anymore. Then you start experiencing GI issues because cortisol also causes a lot of inflammation and GI issues. And, you start getting like stress ulcers and things like that. But it also causes cardiovascular issues, right? Inflammation of the lining of the arteries. Because when you are in this prolonged, continuous state of cortisol, it starts producing more inflammation in the lining of the arteries. And that's what ends up leading to cardiovascular disease because then the body has to start making these plaques or what they call cholesterol because it's trying to band-aid all the inflammation and all the redness in the arteries and veins and things like that. And then as you all know, you start having sex hormone imbalance. So you see that women going into early menopause, you see hormone dysregulation, early ovarian failure, early menopause, things like that for men too, infertility, things like that because the cortisol, you're in a constant state of high cortisol. So where is cortisol getting all these messages from, right? The adrenals are producing all the cortisol. But where are these messages coming from? And this is where a lot of my promise comes in because as you guys know, as a physical therapist, I always got to the root cause. And so this is what attracted me to functional medicine about 10, 15 years ago was the same concept. getting to the root cause of disease and illness. So in this case, I like to get to the root cause. Like, yes, your adrenals are producing all this cortisol, but where is this coming from? And it actually is the messages and the signals that come from the HPA axis, which is the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, right? That's where it is all coming from. So the hypothalamus pituitary, they get these messages of we are in constant stress. They then signal the adrenals to produce more cortisol. So it's a triangle, and it's the HPA axis, two of which are in the brain, right? So hypothalamus, pituitary, they're in the brain. So the perceived stress comes from the brain. So very, very important. And this is where, a lot of brain rewiring comes in, meditation, stress relief techniques. I gave a talk 2 weeks ago, and I just really explained to my listeners at that talk about how it's not just, okay, I'm going to go get a massage today, or I'm going to go, get my nails done, or things like that. It is day to day, constantly giving the messages to the brain that we are not fighting that saber-toothed tiger. We are safe. And whether that includes, going for long walks and things like that after every stressful meeting and things you may have, meditation on a daily basis, breath work on a daily basis, it really, really helps give the correct messages to the brain, so the brain stops misfiring to the adrenals to say danger, danger, and okay, we are safe. And that's when the brain stops with the firing of these signals to the adrenals to continue producing more and more cortisol, right? You need to rest, you need to sleep, because that's critical for your body to understand that, okay, saber-tooth tiger's gone, we are safe now, we can sleep now. And then that helps your body go more into rest and digest. So females that are higher risk for sleep issues, of course, and hence inflammatory issues. So this is why you hear more cardiovascular disease in women. So it's very, very critical for women to get their sleep regulated. Sleep disturbances also dysregulates many hormones like thyroid, leptin, ghrelin, your hunger hormones, your satiety or fullness hormones, and then your sex hormones, right? So cortisol is really doing this number where it's throwing all of those things off. And we really need to bring the cortisol down if you want to lose weight. How many times have you heard women say, I'm exercising so much more and I'm eating so much less and I'm gaining weight? Well, that's because you're putting your body in this constant state of high cortisol. When you're really not getting the calories and the food that you need to get, you're really telling the body, oh gosh, fight or flight, like we're in a famine, we're in a drought, we're going to hold on to all this fat. So you're putting it in a state of high cortisol. When you are exercising very, very intensely, then your body's looking at it as, oh, that saber-toothed tiger is really chasing us and we've got to run faster and faster. So you're producing more cortisol. So it's actually the opposite. When you exercise more and eat less, it's actually the opposite of what to do when you want to lose weight. You need to bring your cortisol down. And, I have amazing success sometimes with patients just cutting down exercise. I put them on a diet where they eat so much more of the good stuff, of course, and they immediately start to lose weight. I mean, they are shocked because I'm having them exercise a lot less. In fact, they're doing more breath work, meditation, yoga, that type stuff, and then eating more, and they start to lose weight. So this, in my practice, the first thing I address with any kind of chronic illness is addressing the HPA axis. Why is that? Because these people have been chronically ill for such a long time. And so when you are chronically ill for such a long time, you are in this state of constant fight or flight. And so what I do is when my patients come to me and they have adrenal fatigue, adrenal failure, very high cortisol or even very low cortisol, chronic fatigue, to me, that just signals that they have been in this fight or flight situation for a very, very long time. So what I do first is I don't address the adrenals. I actually go straight to the root cause, which is the HPA axis, and tell that to start calming down first. So once you stop the signaling and the firing to the adrenals, it starts producing less cortisol, which is when you can then tell the body, okay, relax, the tiger is gone. Relax, we're in rest and digest. Relax, start sleeping again. And so I, in my practice, always start working with my patients with HPA axis first before I put them on anything else or address any of the other stuff. So the HPA axis, as I mentioned earlier, like it will manage glucose, it manages your metabolism, it manages amino acids too, but it also manages the circadian rhythm. So if you can imagine, if you can work on the HPA axis to not continuously misfire, you're going to bring your glucose metabolism under control. You're going to bring your amino acids under control, and they're not so depleted. But you manage your circadian rhythm. So you're sleeping with the sunset, and then you're waking up with the sunrise. And so that's really starting to tell your body that these are the correct patterns. This is when your cortisol needs to be high, which is in the morning. And then during the nighttime, when it starts getting darker, start winding down that cortisol, because I don't need to be alert and awake and ready to run anymore. I'm going to be sleeping. And so that's the job of the HPA axis, which is why I feel in my practice, HPA axis is very, very important to address first, which is why I have very, very good and immense success when I start working with my clients, because they see that, okay, we've been able to calm them down. We bring the cortisol down. That naturally brings inflammation down, starts glucose regulation. And so they start losing weight. And HPA axis has a memory of the history. So anything that happened, the HPA axis stores it in the history. So after a while, it begins down regulating the signs and decreases. So, for people who undergo very, very high stressful situations, and then they have a complete crash, is because for those, year or 2 years, their body just kept firing the signals and producing more and more cortisol. And then after a while, it said, okay, the brain said, okay, we have so much cortisol in the system, the adrenals are completely wiped out. And so now we're just going to completely stop producing cortisol. So, and you know what is sad? I read this study the other day about how there's actual studies that shows that the HPA axis is affected in the mother, but also in the fetus in utero. And so that's a really, really, crazy study, because what your mother's state of mind is really directly reflected in the fetus, right? And we already knew that. Now, the thing is, once the child is born, over time, their adrenals are used to getting this constant fight or flight information from the mom, that over time, after they turn 10, 12, they start having adrenal fatigue issues. I mean, it's just so crazy that you can go from, mother to child, and if not treated and addressed correctly, then you can really affect a child, even though they may not have stress, or the mom's stress may have already stopped, but this is in utero, so they have the memory from it. And so some of the best way to test your cortisol levels, of course, there's urine testing, but I think saliva testing is also very, very good, because you do the cortisol awakening response. And that gives you an idea whether you have like a very regular, it's called a diurnal curve, that your cortisol spikes in the morning as you wake up, and then it peaks, and then it goes, kind of flattens out throughout the day. So that's the kind of best one. But, my patients that come to me, some have very, very flat line cortisol because they've been in this situation for such a long time. Or there's some that will come and it's super elevated throughout the day, or very low during the day and then super elevated at night. So I really have a gamut of all of these things. But my main focus, as I said, regardless, is I start working on the HPA axis, because that's where things were starting from, and that's where things have gone wrong. And so I work a lot with things like breath work, meditation, morning sunlight, very, very key, because that's when, it tells the brain like, okay, sleepy time is done. It stimulates the hypothalamus pituitary to start producing more ACTH. There's already some in the system, but it produces more ACTH and then more cortisol. And that's when you get out of bed and you start moving about, doing your day. And so really morning sunlight is very important, and it signals the whole body that the brain is awake, right? So when you initially wake up in the morning, and this is why I don't like my patients getting on the phone in the morning. I yell at my kids all the time not to get on the phone in the morning, because that blue light disrupts that circadian rhythm and the pattern. Same thing at night. That blue light is not telling your brain it's time to wind down. There's no more light, which means, cortisol is going low, melatonin's going high. But when you're on the phone at night, when you're on the phone in the morning, I mean, these are key factors as to why you have a very disrupted circadian rhythm. So that's another thing that I work with my patients a lot, where we do breath work, like I said, meditation, morning sunlight, walking outside. and then getting off these devices late at night, first thing in the morning. And when you naturally see sunlight in the morning, that signals your body like, okay, hello, she's awake and we're going to need energy now. So not only does the brain wake up, but it starts sending messages to the rest of the body, like lungs, hello, start breathing, like deep breaths. She's going to start moving about. Muscles start working, like she's going to start walking around. She's going to make breakfast, brush her teeth, whatever. It just signals the rest of the body, tells digestion, like, okay, get ready, food is about to come, so we need to start digesting as soon as she eats. So it really starts waking up the rest of the body. And so then that's really how a lot of the systems then wake up. So when you disrupt yourself with the phone first thing in the morning and the blue light, then you really are disrupting all of those processes and you really start to feel sicker and sicker. So in my practice, like I said, when clients come to me and after I take an extensive history and see what they are going through and have been through, then I really, first thing I work on is HPA axis, because we need to bring that HPA axis activity down and give correct signals to the adrenals. And so then once we get that signal corrected, the cortisol starts going down. Naturally, your body starts utilizing sugar in the correct manner. Your insulin is not blocked, so it actually uses that insulin to break down sugar correctly. You're not storing as much fat cells. Your sex hormones, start working appropriately and things like that. And all of those things combined then help you lose weight. So it's very, very, very important to understand this connection between cortisol and weight gain, and how exercising more, starving yourself, none of those things are going to help you. You actually need to do the opposite, to tell your body that it's safe and to tell your body that it's okay to cut down how much cortisol it's producing, and it's okay, you're not running from the saber-toothed tiger to lose weight. To tell your body that it's okay, none of those things are happening, so now you can go ahead and lose weight. And you'll see, I've seen it in my practice over and over. It's like miraculous how much quickly the patients start losing weight within 2 to 3 months of practicing all of these things. So very, very important to really work on the HPA axis, vagus nerve, all of that, which is all connected, and then bring your cortisol down for weight loss. So thanks, guys. Thank you for all your input. I wanted to do this talk today, and then next week I will cover liver detox, because all of that excess cortisol, the liver is a phenomenal organ, and I've said this over and over. I'm going to say it again next week. Fabulous organ, like works very, very hard. And so when it constantly sees all that cortisol coming into the bloodstream, the liver starts storing it, because if it's not stored, it can cause a lot of brain damage. So the liver is like, I have to store all this excess cortisol. And that's why, after a very stressful situation, people start falling sick. So that I will address next week. And we will talk about how I just did a liver detox, feel amazing. I did it last week. I do one every 4 to 5 months and I feel great. And so really how to incorporate a liver detox then, to help get rid of all the excess cortisol, excess hormones, things like that. So, great. Well, thank you guys, and I will see you next week. Feel free to put any more questions or anything you have under this chat, and I will make sure to answer them. Bye.